Hello everyone and welcome to another tier list video. We are doing our third one for this channel and we are joined by a very awesome guest. You've seen them before on this channel. You may have seen them at Worlds as well. It is Ferrinthian. How you doing?
Hey there, Valkyrie. I'm doing great so far. I'm excited to be here and excited to do this tier list with you.
Awesome. Happy to hear that here. And this tier list, we're going to go ahead and be looking at end of AlC season and the start to MRC season and a couple of predictions here just to sort of see how the metas ended and is starting and will shape up in the future. So without further ado, are you ready to go ahead and start placing these champions on the tier list?
I sure am. Let's get to it.
Alrighty, so first one here is we're looking at our Lorraines, and it's going to be Wind Lorraine.
Yeah, Wind Lorraine was really interesting because, initially when it popped up at the very beginning of the, Dawn of Ashes, Fractured Crown, it was kind of this allies build. And as time went on at the AlC season, it really morphed into, after the Nationals, into this Wind Crux Lorraine that was kind of a mid-range control shell that had a lot of play to it. I think that the Allies build was still completely fine. It might have fallen off a little bit, but with the amount of play that it had, both with the Allies and both with the mid-range package, it had a lot of versatility to it, and you never exactly knew what was going on until about turn 2 or 3. So there's that little element of surprise really going on. And looking forward to the MRC season, I mean, I've been hearing a lot of great things about the automaton version of the Allies package and being really strong in this format.
Yeah, you are correct on that. There has been a lot of playtesting going on with it. I feel like Win Lorraine is just one of those boogeyman decks in any season we're in. Because even at the start, as you said, is In Soul was in Wind, and it was one of the big decks there. And she's just always skimming the top of the leaderboards or like the bottom five. And when you least expect it, she'll pop back up, win an event, and then get pushed back down.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I think a solid A tier is where I'd place her. She's always in that fringes of very playable to very good, but she has that shift in tide where she's really good for a little bit and then she kind of falls off once people figure out how to play around her.
Exactly. So with that, she goes ahead and gets that A rating. Now we're going to be looking at Water Lorraine, and I want to start here. Is Water Lorraine has had a very interesting, unique development over the course of this game. It started with her placing in top 32 at a St. Houston with a weird ally hybrid list, and then it sort of went more and more into allies, deeper into that. When AlC came out, it turned fully into a water aggro list with a top end of a couple Ghosts of Pendragon. So I'm really curious to think where you think this sits with the other water ally decks out there.
Yeah, this one I had a lot of time considering because when I was doing testing for Worlds, I was really on the tank of what happens to be the best water allies build that I could possibly either take or what I might face against. And what I had kind of come to was that Lorraine was pretty much tied with Xander, and it was because that you had two different modes that you could do with it, whereas Xander was a very specific I am a water allies deck, but I have a little bit extra burst. Lorraine felt like she could do that water allies turn, but she had extra draw on that drawn blade and the ability to go to level 3, bring it back, get a draw, and then potentially play either Ghost of Pendragon or Spirit Blade Dispersion. So I think she's one of the premier water decks, especially in the AlC season, and probably still going forward. I expect water allies to be pretty strong, at least for the first part of this new meta before it really officially develops.
Gotcha, yeah. With that being said, would we consider this better or worse than Win Lorraine?
That's a hard one. I don't know for sure between the new automaton build and the straight water allies, but it is pretty hard to just beat a straight water allies package and not feel pretty good playing with it. I think I would probably rate it a little bit better, but that's just my bias towards water allies as an archetype. But probably only slightly more so.
Gotcha. I think I'm going to go ahead and get a counterpoint here. With Scepter being on the watch list, I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of a future prediction to think that if Water continues to perform as well as it has been, that Scepter is probably going to get locked back up in the vault. And I think I'd comfortably put that just slightly right behind Wind Allies, just due to the factor, as you talked about and mentioned, is Wind Allies has 3 different variants right now that someone can go, so it's much harder to know exactly how to play against it in the first couple of turns.
For sure. Nope, I totally agree with that.
Alrighty, and then it's sort of I guess the forgotten child of Lorraine used to be a menace, but Fire Lorraine.
Yeah, that one's been hard. Onsol really fell off with the addition of Resolute Stand and Fractured Crown. I know that, there are some builds of Lorraine that are, level 1, level 2 focused that have been doing really well. And I think it still is a viable archetype for sure. It's just you have to be able to play it into a room where you know you're not going to hit either a Water Allies matchup that can Song of Frost you, or another potential matchup that can just stop you in your tracks or stop the damage from your big Rending Flames turns. Um, I think I would comfortably put it at the very top of B tier. Of it still has a lot of play, and Onsol is still a really good card, especially if they don't have Resolute Stand or another way to prevent that damage. And a lot of people aren't going to be prepared for it.
100%. And with each set that comes out, we do get more and more swords, fort, and soul, which is very important. It's a passive buff that that card gets. I agree with everything you said. There is really nothing else to be stated about Fire Lorraine, as she just gets hard countered by water right now with Song of Frost, the Fracturized Lantern, and a bunch of other things. So top of B tier, still a menace, but it's not going to be going ahead and winning big events here. Now, that just brings us over to our next champion, which is going to be Merlin. Do you have any opening thoughts on Win Merlin by chance?
Yeah, this is actually something I play tested quite a bit to see if I could get it to work, and in the AlC season. And I just never got to a place where I felt comfortable with it over the Wind Lorraine. And that was mostly because its level 2 is so weak, because you couldn't rely on that allies package, and any of the other packages that you could kind of play with it just felt weaker than the Lorraine package. And if you didn't see a dungeon guide, you were basically just playing a really, really sad deck that didn't end up doing a whole lot until it got super far in the late game. By the point you were already dead. I think it definitely got a couple of new control tools, which is really neat. And I think that as the MRC season continues to develop and we find which of those win tools really come out top, I think Win Merlin definitely stands a chance, but so far it's pretty unproven besides the original Fractured Crown top 8 at the first ascent. I'd probably put it in a C tier right now, but I think that can definitely bump up. A, because it's just a Merlin deck and Merlin's pretty dang good, and B, because of the tools that it can eventually find out as the meta develops.
Awesome answer there. I agree with you. When Merlin feels like it has a bunch of really cool tools, you lose access to a lot of stuff, which makes Win Lorraine good, as you stated. But I also just think, in comparison to the two other elements you can put Merlin in, Win just doesn't feel right. It loses the draw power from fire, and it loses some really big tempo advantage from water that you can get. Which brings us over to our Water Merlin.
Yeah, Water Merlin, I have a huge story with. So I have a friend that plays in most of the major events that we do. And no matter the size, whether it's a locals or whether it's a regionals or an ascent, we always get paired round 2 or 3. And the very first time that I heard, like, oh yeah, I'm taking Water Merlin to this regionals, and I was like, ah, what a meme. That's never gonna do well, because I was Fire Merlin pilled. And we, of course, faced round 2, and he just blew me out of the water. I'm like, what the heck's going on? This isn't supposed to be a real deck. And then every single time afterwards, he is just 100% of the time had my number. I'm like, well, is this a real deck, or am I just bad at the game? And after he made top 32 at Nationals, I was like, okay, yeah, no, this is probably just a pretty dang good deck. Um, and I think it just continues to get better. I think it's one of those sneakier picks where you're not going to be prepared for it, and it's going to blow you out of the water because it just draws the right thing at the right time. And I don't think it's quite as good as Fire Merlin, but I think it has a lot of really positive matchups. And I'd be really comfortable putting that like straight in the B tier, and like maybe bumping it up if if something gets discovered with all that floating memory that's going on in the MRC season.
That's a really good way to put it there. Watermelon has a very high ceiling, a super big potential that is just looking for the right pilot. And as we know from your story, I'm very familiar with this player as well. They have bubbled me out of several events consecutively every time. And it seems like it shows that if someone can just stick with a deck, play it, and learn the ins and outs of it, that it can be a really formidable deck no matter what happens and what deck you're playing against. I can easily see it above Fire Lorraine here in B tier. And as we continue this tier list a little bit more, we'll see if that gets bumped up. But I do feel like it has the potential to really win out some games here. And then, unfortunately, I have to announce this, but we're at Fire Merlin. And I'm just going to, initial thoughts, I'm going to put it up at S tier. And the reason for that is this deck has been the gatekeeper for the longest time since FTC. In Grandarchive, your biggest thing was, does my deck beat Fire Merlin? And if so, how well? That is what you continuously asked yourself all throughout FTC as we were getting into MRC. They have access to Ghost of Pendragon for draw, Incarnate Majesty for protection, for stabilization, and just dealing damage. And then with everything else they have, they can just fireball you as they exponentially scale each turn. She is value wrapped up in a big bundle and served on a platter. Fire Merlin players have been eating way too well for way too long, and I really hope they get dethroned soon.
I think that is perfectly put because, yeah, I agree. It's the litmus test of whether or not your deck is a viable deck is if it has at least a decent matchup into Merlin, or it better beat every other deck in the existence if it's not beating Fire Merlin.
Yeah, so nothing much else to say about that. We're both in agreement. It's a menace. Speaking of menaces, we're gonna go for some less optimal decks you don't see around. We got the Mordreds coming in, and this is something we have to objectively look at because we can both agree that Mordred will not be S, A, or B tier, as he is outshined and outclassed by Lorraine in every way. If you're only going to go to level 2, why not go to level 2 Lorraine as a warrior to get a +2 attack and kill on draw, take advantage of those sweeps and everything? Maybe perhaps there's some secret Mordred techs that people aren't running, but where do you comfortably feel like putting these Mordreds?
You know, I would say probably Gosh, it's hard. Probably the Wind and Fire comfortably in D. I think that there's no reason to run them over Lorraine. With Mordred giving floating memory to attacks, I think there might be something in water, but only at the very bottom barrel of C that I could see.
That's a very comfortable position for it, I think.
Yeah, and again, that's one of those. At this moment, I don't know why you wouldn't just go into Water Lorraine, but there might be something that your deck is looking to attack on a unique axis. Now, I will say, like I was hoping in Fractured Crown would happen, if Mordred ever gets a Luxem level 3, I think we're bumping that boy up all the way to A tier, because holy moly, Excalibur is a heck of a card. If you could get
100%.
everything off of it, whew, all right. We're looking at a big boy deck now.
Well, one day Mordred will level up. As we've seen, Sylvie and Tristan and Merlin have all gotten glow ups. So in soon time, hopefully those Mordred enjoyers will still be around with us as that happens. Now, we're going to go to another gentleman of the game. We got Rye, and I feel very conflicted on Rye decks in general. They are a lot of, I played the game, and you sit there and watch me play the game. And so it's really hard to judge in general. For me, I think with Wind and Water, they are just less optimal fire versions, since most Ride decks are going to be almost pure arcane with about 6 to 11 non-arcane cards in there.
100% agree. Raya is a very polarizing deck for the game where you kind of get to either play the game and you kind of just blow them out by playing allies and they never draw an answer, or they play the don't touch me for 4 turns and then, oops, you die in a single turn. And there was never anything that either player do, so it's kind of an uninteractive game. But I think that he has a place in the meta to stop really, really dirtily control decks that aim to go 20, 30 turns in and try to assemble a really weird win condition. But I do agree. I think Wind and Water are kind of just on lesser scales to the Fire version. Not that they don't have their place. Like there was a very, very solid Wind Rye deck that used to bounce like the Arcane Elemental back and forth to try and get that extra points of value that it lost from not being in Fire. But I think Fire Rye is probably the preeminent way to go, and I think he solidly sits in the A tier for the Fire Rye, where he's going to have favorable matchups and really polarizingly not favorable matchups. And then the Wind and Water, I'd probably put Wind in the B-ish tier, and then Water maybe in the C tier, because I don't really see a lot of Water Rye. He has a lot of the same tools, but I just don't know why you're playing him over specifically Wind or Fire.
Exactly, yeah, and we know there's a lot of battery acid Rye decks that go around. They really try to get that to work, but of course, it's one of those things. If you're going to play Rye, you might as well just play the Fire version to gain the full benefit of what you truly want to do, unless you have a very unique strategy like Wind Rye was doing. Alrighty, so that brings us to Sylvie. Sylvie's going to be weird for us because we only have the 3 elements here, and we don't have like a slime Sylvie. But we can use these elements to sort of just assume the slime's combo is going to be run in each of these decks as well. We can know that fire and wind have been very popular with the recollection deck. However, water slimes aren't really that good at this current moment. We were talking a little bit earlier at the start of this recording session that, sort of how we mentioned with Merlin, Sylvie has become the new gatekeeper deck. And this is the deck that you now want to be able to be with your brews in order to feel like you can go far in an event. So with that being said, where would you put Fire Sylvie?
Fire Sylvie has performed really, really well for me in testing. I think I'd put it either the very tippy top of A or kind of at the bottom of S. I think that all of the Sylvies are really, really solid. And I actually think that Wind Sylvie is a little better in my books, but that's only because of the playstyle that I enjoy. I think Fire Sylvie is probably more consistent, and is probably a better pick if you wanted to go to a large event. So I'm comfortable with like S, maybe bottom to middle of S tier.
Bottom middle of S. Would you say Water Sylvie would follow suit, or do you think that would be slightly weaker deck due to the blue slime and baby blue slime not really generating as much value?
Yeah, I just don't think that Water Sylvie has the same access to go the slime route. You get the one card that looks at the top 5 and heals you, but it's just not quite the same. I think even just the Norm Sylvie spirit is a better choice than Water.
100%. Yeah, it gives access to that. And if we did have Norm Sylvie here, I would say Norm Sylvie would probably be hovering around Wind Sylvie as well.
I would agree.
Alrighty, so that brings us to another champion with recollection, and that is Tristan. I just want to hear your initial thoughts.
Oh, yeah, Tristan has been really interesting because it's hard to evaluate sometimes, because if you're just staying at a base level, a lot of the times I just want to be Xander level 1s. Like, for example, the Fire Tristan, you're doing pretty much the same thing in a lot of ways. If you're just going that base super hard aggro line, and you get a little bit more, flexibility of whether or not you want to or like have that agility 3 at the end, or if you want the prep counter. But a large part of the time, you just want that prep counter so you can push extra damage. So you're really trying to lean into aggressive, or not aggressive, but a more level 3 strategy for most of the Tristan builds that I can see. And that's an interesting line where it's kind of this mid-range control shell that has a lot of tools to deal with. She's been really, really solid for the couple times that I've been able to play against her, but she has a weird place in the meta where she needs to get her combo off to do it, and sometimes it just doesn't work out, or another champion could have handled the things better because of the tools that they had access to.
Exactly, yeah. It's comparing one-to-one assassins. Xander with the Glimpse 2 and the prep counter is so much better than just a prep counter with Tristan when you're wanting to bring out Mercenary Blade, to Blazing Throw, things like that. Going to level 3, all the good prep counter synergies are in Wind currently. I've been brewing Water Tristan right now, and it just feels like she really needs prep counters, or wants prep counters, and you can't really provide her that much in the other 2 elements, and so you feel like you're missing a good portion of like value cards. with that, I think Tristan is probably the best version of the three, and I would comfortably put her at a bottom of A tier. She is, compared to Sylvie, not very strong out of the box, and is going to take a lot more brewing and tweaking in order to find that perfect ratio. Sort of like how Lux and Xander took some time to get rebuilt and found a very good niche in the meta.
Yep, I would absolutely agree. I think a lot of these, it's just going to take time to really solve the deck. And once it's solved and found the strengths and weaknesses it has compared to other champions, I think it's going to have a really nice position in the meta. But until that time, it's kind of just all up in the air.
Exactly. So we're putting Fire Tristan on high B and Water Tristan at high C. I do feel like we can't just dismiss Fire Tristan because she still has access to the aggro variant that Xander runs, and I think that is still very strong.
100% agreed, yep.
Alrighty, and speaking of which, we're back to Xander, our assassin.
Yeah, the preeminent person who stabs you in the back. Yeah, he's a weird one because a lot of the cards, there's a Fire Xander aggro deck that is very true to the assassin, blow you up, do a whole bunch of damage in one turn. But the water version is either this huge control shell that goes into Luxem and just aims to stall out the game, or you can play him water allies, but he's not exactly a full, what you think of the assassin motif. And then the fire version also has that serene Luxem spirit that's been really, really good for quite a bit of time now. And then Wind just hasn't really found a footing besides as just another way to play Wind allies. And I don't know if that's going to change anytime here in the next little bit. I didn't see anything that, because like we were saying, I think Wind Tristan has a lot of those tools that, well, not specific to Tristan specifically, she's able to leverage better than the Wind version of Xander is able to.
Yes, although there has been some rumors in brewing, for Wind Xander deck that is the Luxem control package, but runs a 2 of 1,000 cuts with all the new prep counter generation, and looks to, if they can't win through Lightweavers, wins through that.
I love the idea. I have a local who has been playing that since Dawn of Ashes, and it performs reasonably well. But man, Resolute Stand kind of shuts that whole thing down. And with the addition of Slice and Dice into the meta, I think you kind of have to run Resolute Stand. Whether that's in the main board or the sideboard, that's up to you. But that card is such a menace to so many decks where you're just like, oh, I'm winning. And then all of a sudden you lose the game on the spot. And you're like, I don't know what happened. But 2 reserve cost and 3 prep counters later, and I'm out of this game.
Yeah, Slice and Dice is it's a hell of a drug.
It absolutely is. I would probably put Wind Xander probably in the C-ish tier, maybe low B, somewhere in there. I don't know why you're playing him over one of the other Wind allies. He seems to be kind of the weakest one. He has some cool combos, but yeah. Water Xander, I'd go A2, and then the Fire Luxem Serene or the Fire Aggro, I'd put straight into S. I think those 2 decks are fantastic. The Luxem got a lot of, top 8s and top 4s in a lot of events, but I don't think you can disregard the Fire Aggro, especially at the start of a season. I think that's going to be a menace for Ascent Taipei.
Agreed with you on exactly what you said there. Just aggro at the beginning of a season is insane. Too many people are trying to do too much in brews or niche techs, and sometimes it just takes beating your opponent turn 2, turn 3 to win a big event. So would you say above Fire Sylvie or below?
I would probably say above. It's been established, and you like it has a very clear, here's how I'm going to win in both versions of the Fire Xander that you can like realistically play and have been established. And I think while Sylvie can have some game into the Luxem variant if you draw well, I think on average the Luxem build is favored, and I think the Fire build just kind of runs Sylvie over if she doesn't get a lot of intercept.
Okay, gotcha there. Speaking of a deck that sort of runs you over, but at the same time does nothing, Diana is a very polarizing champion for me. Best way to put it is just Katy Perry's hit single Hot and Cold. I feel like sometimes I lose against a Diana player instantly and felt like there was nothing I can do. And then there's other times where I'm like, are they even playing the game? Or did they just decide to sit here and watch me?
Yeah, nope. When I play a water deck and I see a Diana player, I'm like, oh, nice. This is pretty easy. And then when I'm playing a Merlin deck and they get double Dungeon Gun, I'm like, oh, I was never playing the game to start with. A lot of what I've evaluated Diana is she's a very fragile kind of combo-ish deck in a lot of ways. Very similar to Rai, but all of her pieces have interaction. And if you have a way to interact with those pieces, she just kind of crumbles apart. I will say though that with the addition of some of the cards in the MRC season, I think Wind Diana stands a really strong chance of being a breakout deck this format. She has access to a lot of new tools that help her get either guns or bullets out with the Emerald Pistol and some of the new bullets. And Turbulent Bullet, shot from either the Blast Shot Pump or Shadow's Twin, is insanely good. It just gives you so much value. It puts on so much pressure. You can almost just ignore the board and skip a fundamental tenet of Grandarchive and just say, I am pushing 9 to 12 damage, and there's not much you can do about it. So I'm really looking forward to where she's going to go. I think she kind of hovered in the, like, for basically all of her decks, in the kind of B to A range. I think she was one of the weaker water ally decks in the format of the AlC season, and the Fire Diana was really, really polarizing, and it was really good into some things and really bad into other things. But yeah, I would say probably, well, I'm going to use one of my little points to say that I think that Wind Diana is probably going to be in that high B to low A tier for this format.
Gotcha. Okay. I can definitely support that decision. Wind Diana has these scary tools as mentioned, has the potential. Now, would we say she is above or below Wind Lorraine?
Ooh, I would say definitely below Wind Lorraine until she proves herself.
All right.
But
then Water Lorraine or Water Xander, do you think she beats?
ooh, I honestly, I would put her at the very, very bottom of the A tier.
Bottom of A?
I still think that if you play a Song of Frost on one of those turns or a Fracture Eyes on the gun at the right time, I think she still kind of just falls apart.
All right, so not too confident in it, but confident enough to bump her up. I get you.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, that brings us to one of the hometown heroes, one of the crowd favorites, but unfortunately, for everyone who's an Arisana enjoyer, she is just bad.
Yeah, this is one of the few decks where I would, unless something crazy gets figured out, I would probably not bring to a big tournament with the expectation of winning or even doing well.
Yeah, she just, to me, has the tag of I'm here for fun. I'm here because I really enjoy this character or the way the deck plays. But she just does what Merlin and Rai do, but worse in every aspect, and has a lot more hurdles to jump through, and very susceptible to a lot of strong decks.
Yep, I think the best way I heard it put was that she is the smoothest ride to 35 miles an hour, and all of the other decks are passing around you at 90 to 100 miles an hour.
Oh gosh. I do give her a little bit of credit though, because I do believe Water Arisana instantly beats out the Mordreds.
Yeah, I think I could agree with that.
Fire Arisana is funny, has potential, and I would also be comfortably say beats the Mordreds.
Yeah, I don't know about the Wind Arisana if she's beating the Mordred.
Oh no, I'm putting Wind Arisana at the very bottom. Wind Arisana. Unfortunately, it's always a weird thing, and like we could sort of see the spread as it is. Wind is a polarizing element. It makes some champions just so good with their net neutral cards and some of the value, and then you bring another champion into the element, and it's just like, this absolutely sucks. Why don't I just play fire?
Yep, I will say my favorite memory that's going to last for a long time is playing the Wind Arisana build that aids to combo off with like Scry the Stars and the material deck card that lets you do kind of an infinite go through your deck. And then I got it all out, assembled it, and did the thing, and then I realized that with all of the cards in my deck, I was still 5 points of damage short to kill them. I was like, well, I have an infinite combo that spins the wheel, and I don't have enough points of damage, so I guess you win.
Oh, yeah. Well, everyone, we're getting close to the end here. We're about to go into our boy Tony. If you guys are still with us and have enjoyed the video to this point, go ahead and comment down below what you think about the tier list, the predictions so far, sort of what we've talked about, and go ahead and give your opinions on, are we correct about a bunch of these champions? Are we wrong? Are you an Arisana main and you think she is A tier because you body every Merlin player you play against? Please let us know. And with that, Tony, we have 3 different elements, 3 different play styles. He is a weird deck right now. Do you have any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I really, well, so when I was doing testing, I thought that Water Tony was probably the weakest out of the water allies, but he had some really polarizing matchups that made him better into some and worse into others. The Wind Tony, I think, is just a very strong deck, as you can see at what happened at Worlds. Sometimes it just gets everything it needs to, and that one turn of taunt to protect your board is all that you need. And I was for a long time considering the Fire Domain Tenuris that Jimmy Lee kind of created and has been propping up.
Shout out to Jimmy.
Yeah, shout out to Jimmy. I played that deck for a while and I was like, oh, this is great. And then I took it to one minor event and just got my butt handed to me. I'm like, yeah, I can't play this deck. I don't know what's going on, but he is just on another level with it. I think they got a lot of cool tools, and I think the water deck, whether it's the allies build or the more like going further into the domain style and being able to play that full control variant, I think the water deck has gained a lot of new cool tools to be able to deal with the meta. But I think the other ones are kind of right where they are. With, I would say Wind Tony is probably in that A tier of, most Wind ally builds are gonna be pretty dang good and consistent. The water build, I think, is kind of sneaky. I would probably put it somewhere in the middle of B tier, below the, like maybe above or below the water Merlin, somewhere in that area. And the Fire Domain Tony, or even just a Fire Aggro Tony, I don't know if it has the legs to snuff unless you are a dedicated Tony stan. And unfortunately, at this moment, I am not. I would probably put him in the top of C, where he can definitely win if the opponent doesn't have an answer. But man, if they have any number of answers, I don't know what the combo deck does.
Beautifully spoken here. I do think Water Tony, not only is it the ally list, but we do have that control list popping up that a lot of players have gone on, which we placed it right above Water Merlin, but I'm going to bump him right behind Diana, just because the water control list has a lot of potential, and if that gets explored a little bit further, it can stomp a lot of these ally decks out, which I'd love to see. I want to see it cut down, because we look at A tier right now, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 just ally aggressive decks above it, and if this deck can consistently start beating those, it's going to be a formidable foe. Additionally, Fire Tony being on C tier, 100%. Unless you're Jimmy Lee, then it's immediate S tier, because, as mentioned, I don't know how they pilot the deck as consistently as they do. I've messed around with Fire Tony myself with domains, and I've bricked way too many times and was just like, I guess I'm not Jimmy. But
He's just built different, and that's all we can say.
Alrighty, so moving to Alan's. Before we say anything about Alan, I'm just gonna make some placements, and I want to hear your thoughts.
Ooh, Fire Allen. Are you considering Fire Allen as the erupting version?
Yes, only because of erupting and the fact that you gain access to Leopard with Bestial Frenzy. It does have a lot of potential, but also one of those moments of why play Erupting Allen when you could play Erupting Hybrid or just Fire Sylvie. But I do think the deck can body anyone in D tier.
Yeah, it's so hard because I think that there's something there, especially with this new set. Previous to this in AlC, 100% just agree with those ratings straight out of the box. But with the addition of MRC and all of the mechanical beasts, I think that he might have a place a little bit higher in the ranks. One of the testing sessions we did, we played a Wind Allen build into the Serene Luxem Xander, and turn 1, it was one of the Wind Ape, and it came down. Turn 2 was another Wind Ape, and turn 3, those guys got turned on. And that was just like 13 damage coming in every single turn by turn 3. And unfortunately, the Luxem Xander player didn't have Excalibur in hand on games 2 and 3, and they just got ran over. And I don't think that that's a consistent way to win the game, and I don't think that's going to happen all the time. I think that he has tools to do something consistently like that, but it's playing the game on a fundamentally different level, and I just don't know if it works or not because I haven't done enough testing with him. So until he proves himself or some breakout deck emerges with the Mechanical Dragon, the potentially Geldis, the new Minotaur guy, and some Wind Monkeys, I just don't know if he has any place in the meta at the moment over the other decks.
Gotcha. Your story did inspire me, though. I will bump Windallen above Wind Arisana.
I think that is entirely reasonable. I think there might be one case to be made if you're just playing Water Allies Allen. I don't know why you're playing him over some of the other ones, but he would probably be a solid B tier if you're just playing the Water Allies version of him.
Okay, yeah, I could see that there. At that point, I won't even call it an Allen deck, though. It's like you're
It's
running
not.
Allen in your material deck just for the fun of it.
You're saying I want Capricious Links in my deck, not anything else.
Alrighty, that brings us to our last 3 here, and with these 3, since they are have their own element, they're not going to be separated by elements. We're just going to be viewing them as their base level to themselves, and just the type of decks that they fill in. So, Nico, I have a video releasing already. Hopefully it is up by the time this video is out, where I go over my 2 weeks of testing with Nico, everything I've done, thought of, and sort of my starting thoughts, middle thoughts, ending thoughts. And she has a very weird spot in the game. She's not an aggro deck. She's not a control deck. She fills a very weird tempo mid-range style that you have to have really good timing on exactly when to pull the trigger on Ravishing Finales and things like that to have a chance at winning a game. If you do it too early, you just lose. If you wait too long, you just lose against a bunch of these decks. There's potential in her, but I don't see her taking a big event anytime soon.
Ooh, so are you thinking kind of in that B to C range?
I am, yeah. I comfortably thinks she beats Water Sylvie, Wind Rye, and then this is where I think it gets rough, because you could beat Fire Lorraine, or if you're just not prepared well, because you have to run so many things, Fire Lorraine can run you over.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think with this new set, she got so many more tools than every other champion in the game, with all the weird floating memory stuff in water and just the specific cards that she got, like Ravishing Finale. I think that she holds a like you said, a really unique place in this meta where she has polarizing matchups and is just a weird deck. But I think that she has the potential to go a lot higher if the right ratios of cards come out and you can kind of fine tune that deck into something that works into a large portion of the metagame. Just with how strong Ravishing Finale can be when you're hitting up to that 20 number and you're milling 40 cards and the opponent just runs out of answers to deal with your board.
Correct. It's fun, though. Don't get us wrong. Very fun to play. Just gonna... Still missing a couple more things. Next, I would honestly just say one more set coming out with water cards that have the word floating memory, and she's playable.
Yeah, I think she's very playable at the moment. I think she just needs that little extra oomph to push her up into that taking an event down.
Speaking of oomph, we got our boy Pocock.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. I you can play Pocock, but why are you not just playing Fire Diana? I mean, I think he beats probably everyone in D tier because the Fire Ranger deck is just that volatile. But I still wouldn't put him in C tier. That being said, a funny piece of trivia is that you can use a gun on the second half of Slice and Dice with the attack, because guns only specify attack cards, and the copy of Slice and Dice being played is not an attack card, but just an attack. And so if you want to get an absolute wombo combo and stun your friends with a whole bunch of damage. If you can figure out how to put prep counters on Pocock in fire, play a Calamity Cannon, and then materialize out a gun, and then slice and dice, hit them for 3 or whatever it's going to hit for. And then the second half, use your gun with Calamity, or with the slice and dice, with the +10 buff from Calamity Cannon. I'm pretty sure on every champion in the game, that's just a one-shot in most cases.
You heard it here, folks. We're gonna have Polcocks running around with a wind hybrid list, going Xander 1 wind into that. That is very interesting. Super cool tidbit. But unfortunately, dies to everything in existence.
Yeah, if you are trying to run that combo, I think we need to create an E and F tier and then put him in G or H. I don't think you're ever going to get it off. And if you have, I think you were going to win that game regardless of the card pile that you were playing.
Oh, and man, this has been a wonderful time chatting with you about everything, but we're down to our just last champion, unfortunately.
Yeah, sad to go, but this one's one of the more exciting ones. With all of the support that he's gotten, he might just be playable. I haven't seen anything, but he might be playable. I think a wind and water allied list could be very potent. I think there was one in the regionals that followed the day after nationals that did either 5th or 6th, one of those like high top tiering places. And it was basically just cram all of the Dream and the Snow Fairies into a deck and see how it goes. And while it might be a bit reductive, I think it worked pretty well into the metagame that was there. And while the support doesn't necessarily support that game style, I think that being able to access a wider range of allies could potentially bring out a lot of unique perspective in Vanitas to have a share in the metagame. That being said, I can't see him any higher than the absolute bottom of B. I think the water slime build of Sylvie beats him out. And I think, honestly, most of the established decks in C tier beat him out. But I think if you're just running an aggressive, being able to ally package that's able to play wind and able to play water or fire, he might have a little bit of play into the meta.
You very wise words coming from you there. Fairies are just annoying to deal with, so if a deck that gets to capitalize by running multiple fairies, you already know that's going to be a problem. I think I'm going to personally put Vanitas at the bottom of B tier, and here's the reasoning why. And that is just for the aspect of the ally list, but also the death and taxes list that has been running around with the Blessed Clergy and Blessed Clergy and a couple of other cards that just prevents your opponent and locking them down. You have that card that you can use floating memory from your opponent's graveyard. And then you have also the card that steals your opponent's Divine Relic. I think with a little bit more experimentation, this deck has potential, but no one's really going to be investing time into it because you said that a bunch of these decks here mollywop him. It's really not worth testing at this current moment, but it can be a sleeper and catch people off guard.
I couldn't say it better myself.
Alrighty, and with that is our tier list. One final look at it, I think S tier being 3 very strong, powerful fire decks. Merlin, the queen of the game, has not been dethroned, and we're already into 2 sets away from when she initially came out. A tier's looking strong with a bunch of your ally lists and a couple of combo decks. B is if you're looking for a deck to play in a large event like an Ascent, a regional, a nationals, things like that, look no lower than B tier. And even at B tier, be very cautious and hesitant at running these decks. And then C and D are for fun. They're great decks, but just not going to be a competitive aspect. Do you have any closing thoughts about our final tier list?
No, I think this looks actually pretty balanced. It's maybe not a bell curve like you'd like to see, but I think S having 3 solid champions and then the rest of the metagame being really healthy and being able to have a large share of that, where there's a lot of viable decks and a lot of things that you have to play around, is a really healthy place for the meta to be.
Wonderful words. A great way to end us off here. I hope everyone had a wonderful time listening in and watching our tier list video. And without further ado, I'm Valkyrie and I'm with
Ferrinthian.
and we wish you a wonderful night and take care.